On a windswept hill, shrouded in perpetual twilight, stood a mansion. Its silhouette, a jagged tooth against the dying sun, whispered tales of forgotten grandeur and unspeakable horrors. Within its decaying walls, shadows danced to the rhythm of creaking floorboards and the mournful sigh of the wind. This was Blackwood Manor, a place where time had turned to dust and secrets lingered in the air, thick as cobwebs. Mac, a man haunted by his own past, had sought refuge in the manor's isolation. He was a scholar of the forgotten, drawn to the whispers of history that clung to the manor's dusty relics. Little did he know his search for solace would awaken something far more sinister. For within Blackwood Manor's depths, a darkness slept, waiting for a soul vulnerable enough to awaken it. Days turned into weeks as Mac delved deeper into the manor's mysteries. He spent countless hours poring over old journals and faded photographs, piecing together the mansion's tragic past. One afternoon, while exploring the mansion's dusty attic, Mac stumbled upon a locked door hidden behind a tattered tapestry. Curiosity gnawed at him, an itch that demanded to be scratched. What secrets lay hidden behind this forgotten portal? The lock, rusted and stubborn, finally yielded to Mac's persistent efforts. The heavy door creaked open, releasing a musty scent, the breath of forgotten years. As Mac stepped inside, his eyes struggled to adjust to the dimly lit room. Dust motes danced in the faint rays of sunlight that pierced through cracks in the boarded-up windows. The room was sparsely furnished, its only notable inhabitant a large, ornately framed mirror propped against the far wall. Its surface was clouded with age, a mosaic of cracks and blemishes obscuring its reflection. Intrigued, Mac approached the mirror, his hand instinctively reaching out to brush away the thick layer of dust. As he did, the reflection within stirred, a flicker of movement in the shadows. Mac paused, his hand hovering inches from the mirror's surface. Had he imagined that? The room was silent save for the faint hum of the old ceiling fan. Dust particles floated lazily in the air, catching the dim light that filtered through the heavy curtains. The mirror, an antique with an ornate frame, had always been a fixture in his grandmother's house. It had seen countless faces over the decades, but today it seemed to hold a secret of its own. He leaned closer, peering into the depths of the glass, his breath fogging the cold surface. The fog created a temporary veil, obscuring his reflection momentarily. As the mist cleared, he searched the mirror for any sign of what he thought he had seen. His mind raced, replaying the fleeting moment over and over. Was it just a trick of the light, or perhaps his imagination running wild in the dimly lit room? His reflection, shrouded in shadow, stared back, its features blurred and indistinct. The shadows seemed to dance around the edges of the mirror, creating an eerie, almost otherworldly effect. He felt a chill run down his spine, a sense of unease settling in the pit of his stomach. The face in the mirror was his, yet it felt foreign, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. The eyes, usually so familiar, now seemed distant and hollow. And then, for the briefest of moments, he saw it. A flicker of movement in the reflection's lips, a ghost of a smile that didn't quite reach its eyes. It was a smile that held no warmth, no joy. It was as if the reflection was mocking him, taunting him with its eerie presence. Mac's heart pounded in his chest, the sound echoing in his ears. He took a step back, his mind racing with questions. What was happening? Was he losing his grip on reality? The smile lingered in his mind, haunting him even as he turned away from the mirror. He couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching him from the other side of the glass. The room felt colder, the air heavier. Mac knew he had to find out the truth behind the fleeting smile, no matter where it led him. Mac recoiled involuntarily, a chill crawling down his spine. He tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, attributing it to the mirror's eerie atmosphere and his own overactive imagination. But as the days turned into nights, the strange occurrences persisted. He would catch fleeting glimpses of movement in the mirror's reflection, accompanied by faint, insidious whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Sleep became a distant memory as Mac found himself drawn back to the attic room night after night. The once cozy space had transformed into a realm of shadows and whispers, a place where the air felt thick with unseen presences. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of the wind outside seemed to carry a sinister undertone. Inexplicably captivated by the enigmatic mirror, it stood in the corner, an antique relic with an ornate frame that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The glass was cloudy, as if it held secrets from another time, another world. Mac couldn't tear his eyes away, feeling as though the mirror was watching him just as intently. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, just an old piece of furniture with no real power. He shook his head, attempting to dismiss the growing unease that gnawed at the edges of his mind. "It's just a mirror," he whispered to himself, but the words felt hollow, lacking conviction. "A trick of the light," he reasoned. The flickering bulb overhead cast erratic shadows that danced across the walls, creating fleeting shapes that seemed almost sentient. He told himself it was all in his head, a product of his overactive imagination and the exhaustion that weighed heavily on his shoulders, a figment of his exhausted mind. The sleepless nights were taking their toll, leaving him feeling drained and disoriented. His eyes, bloodshot and weary, struggled to stay open, yet he couldn't bring himself to leave the attic. Something held him there, an invisible force that refused to let him go. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted, one that grew with each passing night. The more he tried to ignore it, the more it festered, spreading its roots deep into his psyche. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the mirror was more than just an inanimate object, growing steadily into a chilling certainty. The attic, once a place of solitude and reflection, had become a prison of fear and uncertainty. The shadows seemed to grow longer, darker, as if they were reaching out to him, trying to pull him into their cold embrace. The reflection in the mirror was not him, at least not the him he recognized. The face staring back at him was twisted, distorted, as if seen through a funhouse mirror. It wore an expression of fear and desperation that mirrored his own, yet there was something else, something darker, lurking beneath the surface. Or rather, it was not entirely him. The eyes in the reflection seemed to belong to someone else, someone ancient and malevolent. They bore into him, piercing through his facade of rationality and exposing the raw terror that lay beneath. Mac felt a chill run down his spine, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He knew with a bone-deep certainty that the mirror held a dark secret, one that threatened to consume him if he didn't find a way to escape its grasp. One night, as Mac stood before the mirror, his reflection mimicked his movements, but with a subtle, mocking exaggeration. He raised an eyebrow, and the reflection responded with a grotesque contortion of its features. Panic welled up inside him, cold and suffocating. This was no trick of the light, no figment of his imagination. The reflection was alive, independent, and it was mocking him. Suddenly, the reflection moved on its own. Mac had always been skeptical of the supernatural, dismissing ghost stories and eerie tales as mere figments of imagination. But tonight, as he stood alone in the dimly lit room, he couldn't deny the chilling reality unfolding before his eyes. The mirror, an antique piece with an ornate frame, seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread settled over him like a heavy shroud. It reached out from the mirror's surface, a spectral hand shimmering in the faint moonlight. The hand was translucent, its fingers long and bony, moving with a deliberate slowness that made Mac's skin crawl. He could see the faint outline of veins and tendons, as if the hand belonged to a creature caught between the realms of the living and the dead. The moonlight streaming through the windows seemed to give it a ghostly glow, adding to the surreal horror of the moment. Max stumbled back, his heart pounding against his ribs like a drum. Each beat echoed in his ears, drowning out the rational thoughts that tried to assert themselves. He had to get out, had to escape this nightmare, but his legs felt like lead and his breath came in short, panicked gasps. The room seemed to close in around him, the shadows deepening and twisting into grotesque shapes that danced at the edge of his vision. The hand, cold and insubstantial, swiped through the air, missing him by inches. He could feel the chill emanating from it, a cold that seemed to seep into his very bones. The hand moved with a purpose, as if it was searching for something or someone. Max's mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Was this some kind of hallucination, a trick of the light? But the fear that gripped him was all too real. Terror lent speed to his limbs. He turned and ran, his feet barely touching the ground as he sprinted towards the door. The room seemed to stretch and warp around him, the distance to the exit growing impossibly long. His breath came in ragged bursts, and his vision blurred with tears of fear and desperation. He could hear the faint whisper of the spectral hand behind him, a sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Max spun around, desperate to escape the room, but the door slammed shut with a resounding boom. The sound reverberated through the room, a final ominous note that seemed to seal his fate. He pounded on the door, his fists bruising against the unyielding wood. "Let me out!" he screamed, his voice cracking with terror. But there was no answer, only the oppressive silence and the ever-present chill of the ghostly hand. He turned back to the mirror, his eyes wide with fear, and saw the reflection staring back at him, a twisted smile playing on its lips. The reflection stirred once more, and Mac knew that he was not alone. He rattled the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. He was trapped. Behind him, he heard the soft whisper of footsteps approaching. Each step sent chills down his spine, each one a terrifying countdown. He whirled around to face his tormentor. The reflection stood before him, no longer a shimmering apparition, but solid, tangible. It was him, and yet not him. His features, once familiar, were twisted into a grotesque mockery. And in its eyes, Max saw a chilling emptiness, a hunger that sent shivers down his soul. Mac lunged for the mirror, a desperate attempt to break free from the nightmare, but his hands passed through the cold glass as insubstantial as smoke. He was trapped. The reflection advanced, a triumphant smirk playing on its lips. "You wanted to know the manor's secrets," it hissed, its voice a chilling echo of Mac's own. "Now you'll become one of them." The reflection lunged, its hands reaching for Mac's throat. Mac screamed, a primal cry of terror that echoed through the empty mansion. He felt a searing pain as the reflection's grip tightened, cutting off his air. And then everything went black. When Mac awoke, he found himself staring into the familiar depths of the mirror. His reflection, however, was gone, replaced by an empty void. He reached out, his fingertips brushing against the cold glass. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own reflection. Outside the reflection, now a perfect copy of Mac, strolled out of the attic room, a sinister smile playing on its lips. The manor, once a refuge, was now its domain, and Mac, lost in the mirror's depths, could only watch in horror as his reflection claimed his life. The haunted Mac mansion.